I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a wonderful book, a book you will just love. It is called An Agriculturist's Well-Lived Life, influenced by the Transcendental Power of Flowers. It's written by a terrific author, one of my favorite guests, Dale Heinzman. This autobiographical novel is more than just a memoir. It's a love story, a family history, and a unique journey through the life of a man deeply connected to his roots and passions. Join us as we explore the rich tapestry of Dale's life, woven with memories, love, and the transformative power of flowers. We're delighted to have this very talented author joining us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his beautiful book. The links are below the interview. Dale, great to have you back on our show today.
It's wonderful to see you too again, Logan.
I noticed during our first interview on the credenza behind you, there were vases of flowers and a framed picture. Tell us a little bit of the story behind them and why you decided to display them.
Well, I was so wrapped up in discussing all the details of the book with you that I forgot to mention them. But basically what they are is I have several exclusive varieties of herbaceous peonies that I purchased from a well-known hybridizer in Missouri. And he sold me several of his varieties, meaning that, of course, I got all of the stock, so they were my exclusive varieties. I registered with the American Peony Society, and the ones that were in the picture, the white ones were the one that I named for my mother, Esther Heinzman, to honor her. And the red one was the one that I named for my son, Eric, and that variety is named Eric William. That's, of course, William is his middle name. So at least those two varieties got in the picture. Of course, now there are no peonies blooming. They're long gone for the season. And then the picture was of our grandson, Jack. He's 8 years old. He's doing very well. He's our only grandson. He's very athletic, and he's the love of our life. So that really kind of explains what was going on there. And then I think I should mention that I should mention right away at the beginning here that flowers are really loved by everybody. They give everybody joy and happiness. And so I think that's another a strong point of my book, is that it is focuses on how flowers impacted my life and in such a positive way.
Absolutely. They do have a transformative power indeed. Now, in your first interview, you did an excellent job explaining your book's message. Would you please summarize briefly before we move on to the unique structure of your book?
Yes, I mean, basically, everyone, every person, and even philosophers going back to the beginning of recorded time struggled with what is the meaning of my life, or what is the meaning of life in general, and what did I accomplish, and what was the purpose? And so that really was what I focused on in my book. And again, it's something that everybody faces. And of course, as I said, flowers are a very positive impact for everybody. So that really covers it relatively well, just briefly. And as I say, in the process, I developed a unique genre to hook readers into it more, to make it more personal, and just something that people would want to read, that they would relate to their ancestry. And that's why I did it that way.
Absolutely. It's very creative, this autobiographical novel. In the book, you give yourself fortunately, a fictitious cancer diagnosis in the first sentence of your book. Tell us why you chose to do that.
Well, that again was a way to hook people in. And really, when you stop to think about it, everybody as they age is likely to face some kind of an illness issue, which is going to have a major impact on their lives. So I feel again that by doing it that way, it gave me the impetus to keep on working to get the book written. And then, of course, the question is whether, before I died, and if indeed I did die, and of course, obviously the readers are going to have to read the book to find out what actually happened. But again, as I say, it's something which is highly personal, but it's something that people will relate to because everybody faces these kinds of issues. So I think that summarizes it to really fairly well.
Sure. And in some ways, you're most alive when you're facing death, in a way, because you're acutely aware of what you have and what you don't want to lose. So I
Well,
think
that's
that's,
exactly right. That's
yeah,
exactly true. And then that's when you really are going to analyze and think, well, what did I really accomplish? And hopefully you'll be comforted by the many good things you did, because I think most people are good people and they do lots of good things and they do have an impact. And that's what I think all of us would like to see happen in our lives.
absolutely, absolutely. What do you feel is the most heartwarming aspect of your book?
Well, if I go into details about that, then I would think that the most heartwarming aspect is really the very loving attachment between my wife and me. Now, many readers have told me that really is a extremely captivating part of the book. I mean, we've had a loving relationship now for going on 47 years, and it really is heartwarming to learn about those kind of details, and then again to see how we are coping with this fictitious cancer diagnosis, and in dealing with her in so many instances in my book as I was writing. There's so many ways that we interact, that she uh, understands what I was doing in my book, and she has a different viewpoint on it. She gives a different aspect to it, and again, it makes critical parts of the book highlight,
Mhm.
and it just again, it's another hook just to keep people involved. And a lot of people have told me that that really has been one of the things they most enjoyed in the book. But and I guess that really is what I think is the most important. Of course, obviously the highly unique sections of the book have to do with the genre, how it was written, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Throughout the book, you've used quoted conversations. Why did you decide to use them so extensively?
Well, again, I think it's very engaging. It keeps it, and I believe people can relate to that. And it just makes it much more interesting. There are actually, I think, 22 different quoted characters in my book. And of course, the most of the quotes are between my wife and me, but there are other important quotes involved there too. And yeah, so uh, I think too that uh, I guess it's really hard to try to summarize it all in a
Right.
brief time here, but I think that that was the most important thing in my book. But there's lots of other instances too where there were other people involved and in these quoted conversations, and that helped you understand also what was going on in my life.
Absolutely. And I think when you get these snippets of conversation, it actually brings it more to life than just reading about it as a narrative. To actually hear the conversation definitely moves the story forward. In the book, as we explained before, it's a very unique genre. And you chose at times to go back and forth between third person sections and first person sections. Why did you make that decision? And why do you think it's effective in your storytelling?
Well, I feel it makes it so much more personal. And the other thing about it is that it hooks people in, and it gives contrast in such a way that unfortunately many of the books I've read, historical novels and so forth, are very well written. But on the other hand, I think they would benefit much more if they brought in a different style as they were going along. Now, for example, when I write in third person, it's like I'm another person. It's not me. It's like another person writing who has an intimate knowledge of my life, so they can write it. And then when I write in first person, which of course I put in italicized text in the book, then it's a situation where it's very personal. You're almost like you're getting a look into my soul. And in many cases, it's almost like I was wearing my heart on my sleeve. So you're really getting a lot, you're getting a lot of contrast as you go along, and you're getting a lot more intimate knowledge than I think you get in most autobiographical novels. And of course, a lot of autobiographies, if you're talking about famous people, I'm sure a lot of those are probably ghostwritten to some extent.
Mhm.
And in my case, I'm not a famous person, but I think by doing it this way, other people are going to be able to relate to what I'm doing to their lives, particularly through all of the really heartfelt conversations between my wife and me.
Absolutely. I felt it was very, very effective. The third person narrative is kind of an omniscient narrative, which reveals some things that you might not even know yourself as a first person narrative. So I think it was a great storytelling technique. Did you use this feature only when writing yourself?
No, you have to realize that one of the most important chapters in the book, which really leads to impacts throughout the whole book on my family and my siblings and so on. That was back in 1917 when my father was 12 years old, and this chapter is fictionalized, but unfortunately, the truth is that his sister died from the Spanish flu when she was 10 years old, and he was the firstborn, she was the secondborn. They were very close, and so I wrote in 1917 when they went to visit the wild daffodils, and they picked a lot of these wild daffodils on the farm where they grew up, which was a few miles west of Waterloo, New York. And then it continues on from there. And then, of course, as I said, she did die from the Spanish flu in when she was 10 years old. That would be the next year after they went to the wild daffodils in this fictitious or this I'd say novelistic section of the book. And that really had a major impact on my father's life. I know that it exacerbated his tendency to have mental issues, and it also had a major impact, therefore, on my siblings, because of course it impacted his marriage and so on too. It impacted my siblings, and it had an impact on my life. So, and I think the other thing to mention about the wild daffodils is when we talk about them, I'm talking about the field of wild daffodils on the farm where my father grew up. And whenever I mention them in my book, it's that same field of wild daffodils.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you mentioned the wild daffodils time and time again in your book. Is
I
there
think
a,
like 24 times or
yeah,
something like that. Yes.
is it a metaphor also, do you feel?
No, I don't think so, really, because I mean, I'm not exactly sure how to define it, but it actually was a field of daffodils. I can
Right.
remember going there, and there were acres. I mean, there would be 20 or 30 big patches of these wild daffodils covering acres and acres. And really, how they got there, that's one thing that I should mention too. And I did in this chapter 5 I was telling you about. I did have my grandmother and Ruth have their thoughts, first person thoughts, were also in italicized text. So
Mm,
that was an instance where that was in there. But as I say, I went to that field of daffodils many, many times.
right.
And then, of course, I've written about it many times throughout the book. And if you want, I mean, I can tell you where the principal times were. I mean, the first place it's mentioned in my book was on page 8, which is in the author's background. And then the next time was, of course, when they were going to the field of wild daffodils in 1917. And I would mention too that that field of daffodils, no one really knows how they got there, but they think I believe that my father told me that his grandfather told him, or his father told him, that when the first time the field was plowed, they struck a foundation of an old cabin, and they figured that the daffodils must have been by the cabin. And every time that was plowed and harrowed, the daffodils got spread further and further out throughout this field. So I mean, there were thousands and thousands of them.
Amazing.
So, when you see that, and then you see when you go on to the next place for the wild daffodils, it was especially important, was in 1977 when my wife and I, Bash and I, were engaged we got engaged in the field of wild daffodils. And then it goes on to like 6 years before my father died that he took me and my two sons to see the field of wild daffodils. And again, it's the same field. And then the last one was when my father died, then my wife and I visited the graves, and I took bunches of daffodils and put it on their graves. So, I mean, this actual physical field of wild daffodils had a lot of impact on our lives and this book.
Absolutely. It's beautiful imagery as well. Such a creative storytelling process you went through here. The name of the book we've been talking about today is Agriculturist's Well-Lived Life, Influenced by the Transcendental Power of Flowers. It's written by Dale Heinzman. It is an autobiographical novel that is more than just a memoir. It's a love story, a family history, and a unique journey through the life of a man deeply connected to his roots and his passions. Dale, so great having you back on our show today. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
And Logan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
But we're done with the interview now, right?
Oh, we're still doing the interview. You can ask me the
doing...
question when we're done. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Okay.
And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.